Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Chris and Justin here, back again. Our second week in a row, we have a special interview lined up, and this one coincides with our last episode where we discussed Threshold's 2001 release, Hypothetical. It is celebrating a 25-year anniversary this year, and we figured who better to talk to than the man behind the keyboard on that album and every Threshold album for that matter, Mr. Richard West. Richard, thank you for joining us again. We talked to you when we discussed Wounded Land. Now we're fast forwarding a little bit into the future, so we'll try to fill in some of the time that passed from that album to this album. But welcome to the Metal Exchange. It's great to have you back.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
And Justin, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm looking forward to this conversation immensely. As we obviously enjoyed diving into this album in some detail. This is a formative album for us, obviously, and so who better than to hear from somebody that was there for everything before and after. So again, Rich, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And I'm going to really start at kind of the beginning. We talked about Wounded Land, the debut, and here we are now just 8 years and 4 albums later, this being the 5th studio album for the band. How had things changed for you and for the guys over that 8-year period? And did you kind of see this as a seminal point in the band's career?
How did things change? We'd changed lineup, I think, probably.
Yeah.
I think that was our era of just constantly changing lineup. So we went from Damien to Glyn to Damien and then to Mac on vocals and even more on the drums. We just went through so many drummers. So Hypothetical represented really maybe the first stable lineup, I think, since the previous album. Although even then, I think Johan James had drummed on the Clone tour, but he hadn't drummed on the album. So even then, that was his first album. So yeah, let's say it's the first album of our stable period where we got to do a few albums together with the same lineup, which is always a nice thing to do.
How did you meet Mr. James? I've always found him to be just one of the most captivating drummers live. It was something that Chris and I discussed during the episode. Obviously, his technical chops are unparalleled. He's a phenomenal drummer. He's a walking metronome. But how did you engage with him? How did you bring him on for the Clone tour? And how did the conversation go in terms of getting him to join the band as a permanent member, for which he still is today?
Yeah, so we'd done Extinct Instinct in 97, and Mark Heaney had drummed on that, but he wasn't available for the tour. So Damien, who was vocalist at the time, Damien Wilson, said he knew of this drummer who was the best drummer he'd ever heard, and that was Johan. And so along came Johan. I think we went through quite a few auditions. Quite a few people came in before that, but nobody really fitted the bill. And then, Johan, as you can imagine, when he came in, was just absolutely spot on. Perfect guy for the job. So he did the Extinct tour, then he did the Clone tour. We kept Mark for the album because we wanted to have the illusion of continuity, which, of course, has eluded us all through our career. And then Johan, full-time for this album, for Hypothetical, and with us ever since. Fantastic drummer.
Was he involved? I mean, I know he doesn't get songwriting credits on the album, but was he coming up with some of his own drum fills, or was that all kind of given to him in advance of the recording?
I couldn't say on that particular album. I think the general process is that whoever's writing the song, normally it's me or Carl, will have put together quite a sophisticated demo, program up all the drums, play all the parts in. So you've got a pretty good idea of what the song's going to be. And then every musician that comes in, whether it's drums or bass or vocalist, will then just bring their flavour, their interpretation to the record. So it wasn't wildly different, but of course he'll have put in some of his fills and changed a few beats here and there. And if you've seen him live, though, he's a different beast live. He will bring fills we've never heard before. Fills where you're thinking, is he really going to come out that in time for the chorus? But he always does.
At some point, we'll definitely have to do a review of the Clone album. So we'll talk just a little bit just about how Mac got on board and how you found him, and if you felt like you had alluded to, like that, you didn't have one album or 2 albums in a row with the same singer until Clone and Hypothetical. When you found Mac, did you say, like, did it feel like, oh, I think we finally found our guy, we have a singer who's going to feel a little bit more permanent, because he did stick around for a handful of albums. But just kind of talk about his introduction into the band.
Yeah, I mean, initially it was an emergency measure. There was no guarantee he was going to stick around. He lived in Germany, so made it quite tricky for us being in the UK. But I think Damien had just left for the second time. He'd got this great offer to do some work in a musical in London, which he did for, I think, 18 months, and came out of it just this really great seasoned performer. So it was a really good thing for him. For us, not so good. We were down the singer again. So there was a guy at a record label called Inside Out, which is the label we eventually moved to. And he suggested a few singers. He sent over a bunch of CDs for us. And we listened through, similar to the drums, really. Lots of people, not all of them suitable. And then we heard Mac, and it's just that golden voice. Thought that is rock voice A in the universe of rock. And it's like, yep, we'll have that one, please. And so he came over. We didn't even meet him. We just agreed, let's do it. He came over, met him at the airport. Fortunately, we got on and we made the record and started a very long relationship.
Was there any consideration to bring Glenn back at this point, or were you ready to kind of try something new at that point in time?
I think the split with Glenn had been a little bit fractious at the time, so I don't think that was really on the list.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think it was probably agreed by all parties that split was the right thing at the time.
I remember 25 years ago, and I can't believe it's been 25 years. Let me start by saying that. I look back and I can't believe that we're 25 years looking back on this record. But I remember when it came out, at least from the fan perspective, it seemed to me, as someone who had followed Threshold's career, that this marked a real seminal point, not just in terms of continuity, but a big step up for the band in terms of exposure and notoriety. It seemed like a lot of people were talking about this album in 2001. Did you get that same sense, or was it just business as usual, put out a record, do some shows around it, and then on to critical mass, the next year or two?
No, I totally agree. It was Wounded Lamb was obviously the first step. This was probably the second big step for us. Later on, we had Subsurface, we had Dead Reckoning, Legends of the Shires, that all gave us different steps up in a way, but this was certainly a significant one for us. And it's hard to say what changed. It was mostly the same guys behind Clone, but it's a very different record. It's the same artist, but somehow the cover's 100 times better. It's the same writers, but somehow we kind of found a cohesive sound that really suited us. And whereas I think with Clone, maybe we were still 1 foot in the future, 1 foot in the past of our sound. I think Hypothetical, we kind of worked out what the future looked like. And it just all came together. And for me, the cover is as important as anything. It's one of the best pieces of artwork I've ever seen on an album. And I'm proud to say it's on one of ours.
Can you tell me a little bit about how that cover art came together was that during the beginning of the songwriting process, or was that once all the songs had been laid down and recorded? How did the cover art come to be?
It was during the recording. We were in touch with Thomas Averhart, the German artist. He'd previously done a cover for Glyn Morgan's band Mindfeed. And then he'd done Clone as well. And he was just kind of getting his feet, I think, in terms of doing metal albums. And then we said we were doing something a bit more progressive. I think all we gave him was the cover, Hypothetical. And so he came up with a hypothetical scene. It was as simple as that. And it's just stunning. I don't know where he got the idea from, but it's just beautiful. It's kind of Roger Dean, but with an extra added darkness that tells you this is going to be a dark progressive album. And it's one of those rare moments, I think, where the album cover actually tells you what the record's going to sound like. So it just marries perfectly.
That's great. We had the benefit of, when we discussed the album, of having a copy of the, I don't know if it was like a special edition or something. I remember I had purchased it at ProgPower 3 when you guys had performed, and I was like, well, I should buy a Threshold record. They were very good. And so the one that I had in the liner notes, like little notes from you and some of the other guys in the band. So that added a lot of color to the episode. And I thought that was a really nice addition to, us people who still have fond memories of physical media, and having a little bit of extra, we're talking about in 2001, there weren't any podcasts where you'd get, an interview like this where you get like inside access with a band member. I thought that was such a nice thing. I really wish more bands had done stuff like that back then. But I guess just to say, as far as the songwriting process goes, it felt like a lot of things kind of came from. There were things that were like previously written. There were songs that like parts from one song that one guy wrote and parts from another song would come together and make one full. It just felt like there was kind of a lot of things being thrown against the wall to come together into this full piece of music. What are some of your memories of prior to the recording process, the actual creation process, the songwriting, and all that? Some of your memories of that whole process leading into the making of the album.
Well, one that jumps out is Long Way Home, which has become a bit of a live favourite over the years. And I'd originally written the song not with Threshold in mind. It was quite different. It had the same lyrics, some of the same melodies, but very different backing track. I think I was trying to do more of a sort of Bon Jovi feel at the time and hoping to sell it to a music publisher, which didn't happen. So I brought it into the band and we did a demo with it. I think Matt recorded a vocal over in Germany at the time, which we've got. But it just didn't sound like us. It wasn't prog, wasn't particularly metal. It was more sort of pop rock. So I got in touch with Nick Midson, who was our second guitarist at the time. And he used to write just riff after riff after riff. So no whole songs at that point. He was just writing riffs and he'd record them all on a little C90 cassette tape. And he'd normally pass that to Carl and see if Carl could use any of the riffs in his songs. So I borrowed the latest tape, and on there I found all the riffs I needed. I just completely restructured the song, put together all the best riffs, and then wrote the song over that. So it became a West Midson composition, and way better than the version I'd written originally. It just kind of had that nice dark depth that Nick always brought to riffing. He just somehow brought that perfect Threshold sound every time he picked up the guitar. So I was very. Is
the other version of the song that appeared on the Light and Space single closer to what you originally had in mind, or is that like a third totally different idea
in the Paradox box set?
Yeah, I think it was like called the alternative version.
Yeah, that was the original.
Oh, okay.
So we re-recorded it. I think 2008 for the box set, and used the vocal that Mac had recorded in Germany. So yeah, that was pretty much it. I think probably we changed the sound a little bit. And actually, we didn't have any backing vocals. Funnily enough, Glyn Morgan is singing backing vocals on that.
Oh, no kidding!
Which is a bit of a rarity.
That's cool. It's a cool version of the song, and I like that. I like that Max sings it differently. Like a lot of times, a singer will just sing it the exact same way they sing it on the first version, but since the song sounds different, I feel like the vocals should sound different too. And I think he really nailed that on that version. I'm guessing not a ton of people have heard it before, but there was another version of Turn On Tune In as well, the compound version. I guess while we're on the subject, if you want to just mention that version real quick.
I haven't listened to it for ages. I think that was just me. That was just me playing around in the studio doing something different. We knew we wanted a few remixes for that box set. So, I mean, the box set was quite fun. We just thought, that won't take long. We'll just do a quick singles box set, 8 discs, 3 tracks on each. Won't take long at all. It took us over a year to put that thing together. And so during that process, we were doing things like the compound version, just recording new versions, seeing what they sounded like. And it wasn't very Threshold, but it was quite fun. So we thought we'd put it on there.
That's awesome.
In terms of the hypothetical coming together, as you look back with the benefit of hindsight, is there anything that you would have either changed or additions you might have made to enhance the album? Because as we look back on it with such fond memories, it still holds up so well today. But I think that when a musician often is self-reflective, they may tweak certain things just, with the benefit of hindsight. How do you feel looking back on the record after 25 years?
So there was one song that never got made that I'd quite like to hear one day, which it'll never get made. But Carl had written something that was a bit more of a power metal track, which he'd given to John Geary, who was bassist at the time. That was his co-writer at the time, and he'd given it to him to write a song for. And he was struggling for ideas, and what he did come back with didn't quite sit. So we decided not to use that. So there is an unfinished, unreleased track there that'll never see the light of day because it never got recorded. Probably would have fitted better than Keep My Head, if we're being honest. So Keep My Head was the other song I wrote, not for Threshold. I was actually thinking of, I don't know if you know a British artist called Robbie Williams, and he did the big song Angels. He was kind of going through a British sort of classic pop sort of phase at the time. So that was written with him in mind. And when I brought it to Carl, I was really surprised he said yes. And I think John was even more surprised. He thought it sounded more like Crosby, Stills and Nash than a Threshold track. So we tried to redeem it by certainly the intro's kind of got a slight Genesis feel, possibly with that electric piano and those nice warm chords. But as soon as the song comes in, it's not very Threshold. I do love the song, and we're going to be playing it for the first time ever live this year.
Oh,
so I'm curious to see how it works in a proper.
It's one of my favorites on the album, and I think the fact that it is a little bit different makes it really stick out. So I had mentioned when we did the last episode that the last for me those last two tracks I think really are such a great way to end the album, because you have kind of this shorter, softer tune followed by this really epic, long, froggy kind of song in Narcissus. So I found that's really interesting to me, because I just found that those two tracks really end the album so well, but also feel really unique from one another.
Although, Chris, I guess the thought of having a power metal-esque Threshold tune excites you
Yes.
as the resident power metal fan.
No
here.
doubt.
So,
I'd love to hear what that was supposed to sound like, for sure.
So I think
I have to add,
yeah, go on.
yeah. Please go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we thought it would work on the album in the same way that Keep It With Mine worked on Wounded Land. Maybe because it's got the word keep at the beginning. I don't know. But I think it works almost like a palate cleanser. You've had the big heavy riffs of Long Way Home and that nice meaty ending on that. And then before you go into the big epic, you just have a little bit of a change of scene. So I quite like it for that.
Agreed. We talk about that a lot, about how we talk a lot about how sometimes in retrospect, you go back and you listen to an album and you're almost like, it doesn't feel balanced, because I feel like there's such an art to ordering tracks on an album. And I feel like this is a case where I think an album was really perfectly ordered in the types of songs. Like I had mentioned that, like, even the Ravages of Time, if it was the second song, it felt like it might have been too soon for a song like that. We needed to have, turn on, tune in first. Like, it's just, I'm sure there's a lot of thought that goes into the order, but that's something that we kind of tend to point out a lot when we're talking about albums. And for this one, I just feel like you guys really hit the nail on the head from start to finish.
That's good to know. Yeah, we spent a lot of time on the sequencing. As you say, it's really important. Makes such a difference to an album.
We spoke a little bit about Keep My Head, but you've got the songwriting credits for Light and Space, Sheltering Sky, and Oceanbound, three of my favorites on the album. I wanted to just ask about Light and Space, because Threshold is known for that killer opening track. You've been doing it basically on every album since the beginning. You really hook the listener in. How did Light and Space come about? Because I remember this being, kind of a big deal in prog circles. It seemed to be one of those tracks that a lot of people gravitated towards, around the turn of the century in 2001. How did the idea come about? And were you looking for that, like, really crunchy but catchy song to kind of hook people in? Or what was the thought process behind the writing?
I'm personally always looking for crunchy and catchy. I think that might just have to be the title of our next album. If it is, it's your fault. Terrible.
Well, make sure you add that power metal song to that album. then we're cooking with fire there.
But I think up to that point with Threshold, it was mainly Carl, John, and Nick were doing all the writing, and I'd put one song on to Psychedelic Tessin, which was just a little ballad under the sun, and then I'd put a couple, I think, on Extinct, then maybe three, can't remember, 3 or 4 on Clone. So I was kind of finding my feet, and I think Light and Space for me is that song where I found my feet. And it's a weird one, so I'll tell you the story, but I don't feel like I can take the credit for it in some ways, because in some ways you hear a lot of songwriters talking about moments where they wrote a song but they didn't feel like it was them. It kind of channeled into them, or they picked it up from the floor of heaven, or they just heard it through the ether. I'm sure you've spoken to songwriters who said the same before. Well, this was 100% one of those songs. I was abroad at the time on holiday. I just had a little notebook in my pocket. And I just started with that, did it, that first little riff. I thought, that was quite catchy, write that down. And then 5 minutes further along, I've suddenly got the little answering a phrase on the synth. I thought, oh, that's good. I'll keep going, see where this goes. And I just kept pulling my notebook out over the next couple of days, every 15, 20 minutes, and just writing down the next bit. A bit of lyric here, a bit of riff there. And before I knew it, I think a couple of days, I had the whole song. And I hadn't even played it on an instrument. I didn't have anything with me at the time. But I had this whole thing mapped out, even down to the keyboard solo. And I read the lyrics back and I thought, that's quite profound. And I just, no pride involved at all. It's like I didn't feel like I wrote it. And they still get me.
Wow.
There's something magical in there. So I don't know how that happened. It doesn't happen very often. But it was, I couldn't give a co-write to wherever it came from because I don't know where that was. But it's
that's amazing.
Special moment for us. And I remember when I played it to Carl and his eyes sort of widened a bit. It's like, okay, your writing's changed a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because although obviously the albums that came before this have a hook to them where the standard listener can obviously gravitate towards the music, I felt like this was one of the first songs in the discography which almost had like radio rock friendly elements, but certainly with thresholds like progressive stamp. It was just so accessible. Not that the songs that came before it didn't have features of that, but this one, top to bottom, it was just so accessible to the listener. And I can't think of another way to start the album. It just made perfect sense with the, kind of the ambient sounds at the beginning before the riff, kind of takes you off.
Yeah, I think that intro riff's just made to be an album starter, isn't it?
Exactly.
Just works nicely.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to doing it again on the Hypothetical tour. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to you more about that before we let you go. But any thoughts on Sheltering Sky and Oceanbound, just the two other tracks that you penned? Because you basically wrote half of the album in terms of the tracks. Do any memories of those two tracks in particular?
Well, Sheltering Sky. So I think up till then, kind of the ballads I'd written had been a bit more traditional, I suppose, in their sounds. Certainly Under the Sun was. Forever. I got a little bit of depth and darkness in there, but it was more of a traditional song. But I never felt free to write something with just a big soaring chorus because it wasn't the Threshold way with Wounded Land. It had to have that darkness to it. And then Glyn came along and wrote Innocent on Psychedelicatessen. That kind of changed everything. So I think when I was writing Sheltering Sky, I kind of had that in mind. It's like, okay, I can do this. I'm allowed to do a big chorus because that worked for Innocent. And that was kind of what I had in mind. It's a very different song, but it's kind of come from the same space, I think.
And any thoughts on Oceanbound?
Oceanbound, I honestly don't remember writing that one. I know I did.
Wow.
I'd just come out of having chronic fatigue and I was quite cloudy-headed for quite a lot of the time. And the song's actually about going through that. So I don't particularly remember doing it. I remember writing the middle bit and I thought, oh, this is fun. I've just gone to a big pop section now and it just, with these beautiful chords and strumming guitars, and I was really enjoying building up those layers. But yeah, the rest of the song was a bit of a blur, to be honest.
I
know we're skipping a bunch of chapters in the Threshold, history, but in the 8 years from Wounded Land to Hypothetical, if you hadn't listened to the albums that were in between, I think the first thing you would notice is there's a massive improvement on the production in general, like the quality of the sound. What kind of improvements in that 8-year period took you from, the raw recording of Wounded Land to this really polished Hypothetical? If we don't have to go into too much detail, but I just think it's really curious, as those are the two albums we've covered, and it's such a night and day difference, I think, production wise.
Yeah, I think technology was moving pretty fast in those days. And, we were all fairly young when we started, and so we didn't have a lot of money. So Wounded Land was made Carl had an 8-track recorder. So he made the whole thing on 8 tracks, in fact on 7, because I think the 8th track he used for code, which you sync up to a computer so you can have some keyboards playing from MIDI. So it was a very small production. And I think the only reverb he had for vocals was a guitar reverb pedal. So it really was a budget production. We then sent it off for mastering in Germany, and the mastering guy crushed it to death to try and make it sound bigger. And it kind of worked. It kind of gave it that larger-than-life sound. From then on, we just kept on buying gear when we could. So by the time we got the Hypothetical, we had a much more sophisticated studio going on, and we'd learned how to use it. So I think you hear on those early albums, certainly if you've got the original mixes, you can kind of hear our progression as producers and recording artists. But I hope if you've all been good boys and gone and bought the first 4 albums that we remixed in 2024, that you'll hear what they were supposed to sound like, because we went back to the original. You can
tell it's a massive shift from the original, which admittedly I still play because I have that nostalgia and it's how I first heard it. But it's almost like breathing new life into those songs when you listen to the new release, because it's just so much more dynamic and powerful because of the equipment and the way it was remastered.
I know when Brian May redid Queen 1 recently, and he's just about to release Queen 2 as well, he said at the time this was how it was supposed to sound. We just didn't know how to get it there at the time. And very much the same with us, especially with the first 3 albums. We just didn't have the way to make the album we wanted to make. And Wounded Land now, for me, it's like, oh, I can hear it. It's breathing. It's got space all around me. It's still got that power, but without having to compress the death out of it to get the power.
It reminds me of Star Wars, how like George Lucas saw in his mind this movie that he like didn't financially or technologically speaking was able to make, and so he's like, I'll go back in 15 years and I'll make this the way that I envisioned it the first time. And in a lot of ways, like, this is what Star Wars was meant to look like, so I'm gonna make it. And so I feel like that's kind of like the film version of what you're talking about in a musical sense.
Yeah, I think if you wait until you've got the experience and you're ready to make the record you want to make, you're never going to make it. Sometimes you just have to jump in and do your best at the time. Probably the same with George Lucas. I've got DVDs of the original and the remaster of his, or the remake of his films. And certainly sometimes I'll go and put on New Hope and put on the original just for nostalgia. I last about 10 minutes. I think, nah, let's go to the remake. I see what he meant. It's a lot better quality.
Yeah. Exactly. As we kind of look ahead here, I know Threshold has several, shows coming up, including ProgPower in Atlanta on September 9th, the day that happens to be my birthday. So I'm looking forward to that immensely. But I know that after that, in October, starts the, I guess, 25th anniversary Hypothetical tour. Have you given any thought to not only ProgPower, but the Hypothetical shows, obviously playing the full album? I'm assuming a handful of other tracks as well, just to round out the set list. But how did the idea for this anniversary come about, and why this album as opposed to any of the others that you could have done in the past or might do in the future?
I think because we finally got around to it. I think we've been thinking about it for the first 4 albums. We never quite got there, and we had like Legends of the Shires. We just kept on touring that. We went back and did 3 years of touring for that one. And this time we thought, well, we want to tour. We haven't got a new album. We looked back at all the anniversaries and we thought, oh, this one actually works. We can do this. And it's quite nice because possibly, so I can't predict the future, but it means this year we can do Hypothetical. If that goes well, maybe next year we'll look at Critical Mass. Then we got a couple of years off. We can do Subsurface and Dead Reckoning. It's quite a nice run of albums for us. It was at the time, it was like a golden run for us, those 4 albums. So I don't know if we'll get to do it, but if we do, I'll be quite happy. That'd be fun.
As will the fans for sure. Is Glyn looking forward to kind of tackling some of this new material, which he's presumably never had the opportunity to sing and certainly never sang live?
I hope so. He's the only one that wasn't there, I guess. And Steve came along a bit later as well, so for bass. But Glyn's already done Light and Space and Long Way Home quite a few times, and I think he's learned a couple of the others for tours in the past. So he's kind of halfway there. Yeah, it's a big ask for him. He came back to the band to do new music with us, which we've done. So saying, can we go and do a nostalgia tour? It's a bit mean, really, isn't it? It's like, that's not what he came back for, but he's been very gracious and he's doing it. So I think that's why I'm not committing to Critical Mass. We're just going to see how this one goes, and we'll see what we want to do next. But it should be fun.
Have you given any thought to making ProgPower part of the Hypothetical, anniversary shows, or is that going to be just something separate?
I think just in terms of rehearsals, I think we'll bring a few. I haven't got a definitive answer yet. So we just did a show last week in Norway. We didn't have any of the songs there. So we're thinking between now and October, we better learn them. So we've added a couple to the set for our next show in May. We're playing a festival in Italy, so we'll get a couple there. So somewhere between 2 there and 9 in October, we'll be gradually building them up, I think. So we haven't got to learn them all at the last minute. So it's quite possible in Atlanta we'll bring a few, but it won't be the full tour, because I think our main rehearsals for that will just be October. It's just scheduling, really.
And have you, it's kind of interesting. You've been had the benefit of, I guess, being back to the States several times now at ProgPower. Chris had mentioned ProgPower 3. Here we are all these decades later. How does it feel coming back to the States and getting to kind of perform for what will ultimately be Glenn's final ProgPower as he rides off into the sunset and hands the reins over to Milton, the co-promoter.
Yeah, as much as anything, we wanted to do it for Glenn. He's been a great supporter of us over the years. So when we were on his dream list for the final one, we thought we got to say yes. I have to say, as a Brit, it's pretty tricky to get to America these days. I don't know what's going on, but the paperwork is ridiculous, like hundreds of pages. And it costs a fortune in terms of visas. So it's a strange one. We kind of think we're supposed to have a special relationship with you, but it seems to be one way at the moment. But we're doing what we can. We're filling out every document and hoping it's enough to get us through. It's not guaranteed yet. We've still got to wait for the visa approval, but hopefully it'll all work.
It's definitely a process, and it's becoming more and more difficult. We're seeing bands just in general, which have gone through the entire process, and for whatever reason, at the 11th hour, are unable to come. I certainly hope that doesn't happen with you. Fortunately, you do have the benefit of that experience and having done this in the past and coming through. So I'm cautiously optimistic and obviously look forward to that set immensely. As far as the larger question, I mean, we can save that for another day. That's a whole nother topic entirely. But I trust that with that benefit and pointing to those old shows, that everything will certainly work out. And obviously, I speak for the fans when I say that it's the perfect band to kind of put a cap on the festival, just because of the relationship you've had. You've been there with all of your singers. And so it just makes sense that this would be the final way to kind of go out. And to the extent that you're working on a set list, you can kind of have the benefit of picking and choosing anything because you've played the festival so many times.
We've had a lot of fans write to us, and festival organisers too, suggesting, can you just do maybe these 3 or 4 songs? And think if we built a set list based on all the requests, we'd feel completely hamstrung for a start. But just to say now, we can't
be playing for 4 hours too, which is the other issue. But
so we can't please everyone, but we will try and squeeze a few of those requests in there.
So I would be remiss not to ask, obviously, on the heels of this Hypothetical tour, are there plans for Threshold to get back into the studio to release new music? Have any songs been written, or where is the band's headspace as it comes to new recordings?
Yeah, it's been quite a while since the last one, so it's definitely something we need to do. As I mentioned earlier, we were in Norway last week for a festival, so we had a good chat over a meal, and we talked about this. It's the first time we've really talked about doing new music again for a while. And I think the current thinking is, I'm not going to make any promises, but the current thinking is after we've done the Hypothetical tour, then we'll start looking at writing and getting back in the studio. So hopefully we'll have something coming out soonish, we're going to say. We do like to take our time, but soonish.
Something to look forward to. I know, obviously, in addition to Threshold, when we spoke last time, you had mentioned the League of Lights project. It's something that Chris and I have enjoyed. Talk to us a little bit about the health of that project. Obviously, on the heels now of 2 albums, how do you see that band's future progressing? Are you still writing songs, for that project? And just to give us a update on League of Lights.
So we did 3 albums. And
3! I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. Did you say 2? So we did one years ago as a kind of full band thing. And
I was kind of referring to the 2 new ones, but yes.
I think they represent the modern League of Lights. I think we went from trying to be a sort of neo-symphonic metal pop band, which doesn't really exist, down to something that kind of worked for us, which is a bit closer to synth pop, I suppose. So we did kind of morph a bit. And we loved it. We really, especially that last album, it was such a joy to do. We had a great time together making that one. We've been touring it a lot. We did one show with a full band, which is really nice, but we've been doing more as a duo, which is a lot more practical. You get a lot more offers to support when there's only 2 of you, because you don't take up much space on the stage. It's quite useful. So we've done some fun shows. We did one with Propaganda. Do you remember the German quartet?
Yeah.
Did that album with Trevor Horn. We did a show with them, which was like meeting my legends. I never go for autographs, but I actually took a couple of 12-inch records along for that one, got them to sign them.
Hey, listen, we were all a fan at one time, right?
We were, absolutely.
That's it.
It's funny. I had mentioned that Keep My Head kind of reminded me of something that would fit in a League of Lights kind of way. And I don't know if it's just because it's piano driven and you wrote it, but it gave me kind of vibes from that, like maybe a little bit of a heavier version of that, but it felt I felt like your songwriting really kind of shone through in that particular song.
Interesting. I'll have to chat with Farah, see if she wants to do it. We have done Avalon by Threshold a few times. We do that as a piano and strings version, which works quite nicely. But for the future, I've probably every musician you talk to has just got a pile of projects they've never finished from the past, and you just hope to get as many of them as you can over the line. So I've got League One, the first album. I want to remix. I want to fully redo that one. We've got a League Zero, we call it, which is the stuff we did before that, which was probably closer to what we're doing now. I'm halfway through remixing that. And then we got a live album we did during lockdown in a festival in Germany with the full band, with Ruth Jolie from Within Temptation on guitar. And it sounds great, and I'm halfway through mixing that. And then we've got an album of rarities, which I really want to put out because it's got some great stuff on there. So I'm halfway through that. So we're just completely stuck. We don't know which one to do. We'll see which one gets to the surface first.
Listen, no shortage of work, which is a good thing. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, or any other projects that you want to mention before we wrap things up?
No, I'm all good. I'm always busy, but don't need to cover anything else. No.
All right. Well,
Rich, which Threshold album should we? Which Threshold album should we cover next? We've done Wounded Land. We've done Hypothetical. What if we ask you to choose our next Threshold album review? What would you choose?
I'd go for the one that you feel passionate about. If you wanted me to choose, I'd probably choose Subsurface or Legends. I think they're the two other incremental steps for us. I've got one more thing. One more thing to say to you though. So just if you can splice it in. So we've just been talking to the record company, and happy to announce that we are going to be doing a remix of Hypothetical. So that's going to be coming out with some different bonus tracks and nicer, fatter booklet with a continuation of the story that the journalist Dave Cockett's been writing in there. So that's should come out probably September time, so in time for the tour.
Writing coincide with the tour, which makes all the sense in the world. That's something to look forward to for sure. This is great. Always a pleasure to have you back. Thank you so much. Where can people find you, Threshold, your music? I'd love to just, plug your socials so that people can find you, reach out, and, kind of ask if they have any questions.
I appreciate that. Thank you. If you want to find Threshold, it's thresh.net, because Threshold was taken. Even back in the 90s, we couldn't get it in time. And for me, just richardwest.uk. You can find out about all the stuff I'm doing on there.
Well, absolute pleasure as always. We look forward to chatting with you again in the not-so-distant future, and of course, seeing you at ProgPower USA for the final edition this September. Thanks again for everything. Thanks for chatting with us, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Really nice to talk to you both. And if I'm ever in your neck of the woods, I'm coming around to play that arcade game.
Anytime, Rich. Anytime.